Tonight, the David Eastman murder trial enters its final phase, the prosecution declaring it has proven he did kill Colin Winchester. The ACT Greens bid to bring the controversial DEFCON 1 music festival to Canberra. A warning from the United Nations Climate Change Panel: end the use of coal or face dire consequences. And calls for a review into the safety of the weed killer Roundup. Good evening, Dan Bourchier with ABC News. The trial of David Eastman over the 1989 murder of Canberra's top police officer Colin Winchester has entered its final stages, with prosecutors beginning to sum up their case. Mr Eastman is on trial for a second time after his original conviction was set aside because of flawed forensic evidence. The trial has been running for a marathon 127 days so far.
Too many coincidences. That's the theme of the prosecution case. David Eastman is accused of shooting Colin Winchester twice in the head as he got out of his car in his neighbour's driveway with a Ruger .22 rifle bought from a gun dealer in Queanbeyan. Prosecutor Murugan Thangaraj started with the material about Mr Eastman's long feuds with the public service, and then his fury when he felt unjustly charged over an assault on his neighbour, telling the jury, ultimately this anger would settle on Mr Winchester, and it became personal. The court heard police had thrown everything at the investigation, and the evidence built up against Mr Eastman. There are too many coincidences in this case for someone other than Mr Eastman to have killed Mr Winchester. Police know which gun was used in the murder and who sold it, although they've never found it. Mr Thangaraj concentrated mostly on the coincidences about possible sightings of Mr Eastman at the seller's home and the fact he suddenly stopped looking for a gun at the time it was sold, even though the seller never identified him. The summing up is expected to take about a week, with more time for Mr Eastman's lawyer before the jury retires. Elizabeth Byrne, ABC News, Canberra.
The DEFCON 1 Music Festival is known for its hard dance music and its culture of drugs. 2 people died from overdose at last month's event in Penrith. Now the ACT Greens are calling for the festival to relocate to Canberra, where they say pill testing could make it safer.
Just weeks after 2 people died from suspected drug overdoses at Penrith's DEFCON 1, the ACT Greens are inviting the festival to move to Canberra.
Provide a more responsible environment where, instead of taking the approach that the New South Wales Premier has taken, of simply saying we're going to try and ban this, that we actually look to have a harm minimisation strategy.
The New South Wales government initially vowed to do everything it could to shut the festival down after the deaths of a 23-year-old man and 21-year-old woman at the event.
I never want to see this event held in Sydney or New South Wales ever again. We will do everything we can to shut this down.
The Premier later softened her stance, saying safety measures would need to be improved. The ACT Greens say pill testing is one way to keep the festival going and boost Canberra's economy at the same time. But the ACT Liberals say it would put more lives at risk. The safety of young people should not be traded for an economic outcome. ABC radio listeners prove it's a divisive debate.
It's just so naive to think that just saying no is going to reduce drug taking. This method has never ever worked at any time in history or in any civilization. So stop being stupid and let's save lives through harm minimisation.
The minister is out of his mind. Why encourage a festival to come to Canberra on the basis that you can do drugs safer in the Capital Territory?
Organisers of DEFCON 1 are yet to respond to the Greens' offer. Isaac Naruzi, ABC News, Canberra.
More than 90% of students at the University of Canberra who say they've been sexually harassed did not report the behaviour. That's the finding of an independent review into campus culture. It's made a raft of recommendations which the university has promised to implement.
Late last year, the University of Canberra ordered an extensive review into its campus culture and handling of sexual assault and harassment. Today came a promise to do better.
If there's one person in this university who is not properly handled, if there's one person who feels threatened in any way, then we are not there yet. And I just want to focus on that.
In her review, former Sex Discrimination Commissioner Elizabeth Broderick found 93% of students who had been sexually harassed didn't report it. The most common reason was students did not believe it was serious enough. But the review also noted there was confusion among students about how to report sexual misconduct.
I wouldn't know where to go or how to go about lodging a complaint of this nature.
I don't know who I would talk to at the university to report sexual assault or harassment. Maybe the security?
The review also included evidence from staff, with one recounting an example of mobbing behaviour during a staff meeting where a group of people went after an individual.
In at least one instance, reducing a very talented, conscientious, well-regarded female person to tears.
The university has agreed to implement all 39 recommendations, including a simpler reporting system, better data collection and a better support system for international students.
We asked her to give us the way forward, and she's given us the way forward, and we've decided to totally walk on it.
Students on campus have welcomed the commitment.
Making it a safer place for us is definitely a step in the right direction.
In the long run, it just always would be good for all students, male and female.
It's definitely a commitment that every school environment, educational environment should have a commitment to. You're coming here to learn, you want to be safe.
The data used in the report was taken from the Human Rights Commission survey of university students across Australia released last year. The rate of sexual assault on campus at UC was 1.1%, less than the national average of 1.6%. While UC hasn't set a time frame for the implementation of all the recommendations, it says it's already made a number of changes and is confident it will succeed in improving campus culture. Elise Fanton, ABC News, Canberra.
A Dreamworld maintenance boss concedes there was a total failure by everybody at the theme park to identify safety issues on a deadly ride. The inquest into the deaths of 4 people, including 3 from Canberra, resumed today on the Gold Coast. It was told some ride repairs were delayed for budgetary reasons, and Dreamworld's safety guidelines had warned of the potential for rafts to tip.
Matthew Lowe has attended every day of the coronial inquest into the Dreamworld disaster. It's looking at how his wife Cindy died alongside Kate Goodchild, her brother Luke Dorset and his partner Ruzi Aragi on the Thunder River Rapids ride 2 years ago. Another 2 weeks of hearings started today after a fortnight of evidence in June. Senior members of the theme park's maintenance team were the first to appear. Counsel assisting the coroner, Ken Fleming QC, wanted to know whose job it was to determine the safety of the ride. Everybody's was maintenance planner Grant Norman's response. Then a stunning concession. Are you then saying that there has been a total failure by everybody to identify the safety issues in respect of this ride? Mr. Fleming asked. In hindsight, yes.
He's senior enough, but he's not up in the management echelons.
Under questioning from barrister Matthew Hickey, who's acting for Cindy Lowe's family, Mr Norman said there were discussions at Dreamworld about whether repairs on rides could be delayed for budgetary reasons. It was decided that that could be deferred until such a time as it would fit the budget better. Yes, that happened. On the day of the fatal accident, the Thunder River Rapids ride broke down twice before the tragedy. The inquest heard Dreamworld's policy had changed from a mandatory shutdown of a ride after 2 breakdowns to it only being closed off after 3. The theme park's safety guidelines were also revealed. Maintenance team leader Stephen Murphy was asked if he knew the consequences of the Thunder River Rapid Ride's conveyor continuing when a pump failed. He said no one had brought that to his attention. The court was then shown guidelines warning the ride's rafts could flip and become a serious hazard. There are a lot of underwater obstacles that could cause the rafts to tip or entrap the guests, the document read. On that deadly day in October 2016, the raft flipped backwards after colliding with an empty vessel. Caitlin Gribben, ABC News, Gold Coast.
The world needs to all but abandon its use of coal power in about 2 decades to avoid dangerous impacts of climate change. That's the conclusion of a landmark report from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. Written by more than 90 scientists and drawing on over 6,000 pieces of research, the report says millions of people will be in danger if global warming is not stopped at 1.5 degrees. National Environment reporter Michael Slezak has the story.
In a busy world, the effects of climate change can seem like an issue to deal with tomorrow. But today, the world's most respected body on climate science has delivered a warning.
If action is not taken, it will take the planet into an unprecedented climate future.
The IPCC examined the difference between 1.5 degrees and 2 degrees of global warming. The world has already warmed by about 1 degree since the start of the Industrial Revolution. That's mostly been caused by the burning of fossil fuels, things like coal and petrol. Scientists say if we keep emitting greenhouse gases at the rate we currently are, we'll breach the 1.5 degree threshold by 2040, and we'll breach the 2 degree threshold by 2065. If we want to halt warming at 1.5 degrees, they say we need to halve our carbon emissions by 2030, and we need to completely reduce them to zero by 2050.
The difference between a 1.5 and a 2 degree temperature rise is really quite large.
For example, over areas like Sydney and Melbourne, we will see 50-degree days where we've never seen them before.
Humans have never seen an ice-free Arctic, but at 2 degrees that will happen once a decade, compared to once a century at 1.5 degrees. And stopping warming at that level will save 10 million people from the impacts of rising seas.
So if you can think of what we're already experiencing, put that on steroids, you're looking at that sort of climate at 1.5 and even far worse at 2 degrees.
To stop warming at 1.5 degrees, the report says coal needs to be all but phased out by about 2050.
Emissions per capita in Australia are at their lowest level in decades. And that's what we're achieving. But at the end of the day, we want to ensure that electricity prices are lower.
The IPCC authors hope their warning isn't ignored.
It also comes with some wishful thinking, that the messages that this report conveys are being taken up and that the urgency of the issue is being seen because climate change is shaping the future of our civilization.
A future the scientists say could still be changed. Michael Slezak, ABC News.
A Four Corners investigation has revealed that the nation's pesticide regulator has not reviewed the world's most popular weed killer for decades, despite global concerns about its safety. 3 years ago, the World Health Organization's Cancer Agency classified the chemical glyphosate as probably carcinogenic to humans. It's the key ingredient in Monsanto's Roundup products. Here's Stephanie March.
For decades, ads for the world's most popular weed killer have convinced gardeners Roundup is safe and effective. But in America, more than 9,000 people are suing, claiming chemical giant Monsanto's flagship Roundup products contributed to their cancer. John Barton is one of them. He sprayed Roundup on his California cotton farm for decades.
After I got done during the day, my Levi's would be soaking wet, my boots would be wet, my socks would be wet.
Now he's got non-Hodgkin's lymphoma and he blames Roundup.
They should have warnings that let people make that, decision for themselves whether they want to use the product or not.
The company insists Roundup does not cause cancer.
It is the safest herbicide that's ever been developed. It has just an amazing record of not just productivity and use, but also the extent to which it has been examined and scrutinized and studied over 40 years.
Four Corners can reveal Australia's pesticide regulator hasn't formally reviewed the active ingredient in Roundup, glyphosate, in more than 2 decades.
Our conclusion is that any risks associated with glyphosate can be managed appropriately and that the product remains safe to use.
In the past 3 years, the industry lobby group CropLife Australia has contributed more than $100,000 to political parties. In 2014, CropLife bragged about getting federal parliament to remove a requirement that would have forced regular reapproval of chemicals like glyphosate.
We won't make just donations to political parties. We're an apolitical organisation, but we do participate and support any conferences or events where agriculture will be talked about.
They're paying to have influence, and we're seeing this across a whole range of industries, and we fundamentally believe that the policy table should not be the subject of industry interference.
Cancer Council Australia is calling for a thorough and independent review of glyphosate. Stephanie March, ABC News.
There are calls tonight for the New South Wales Heritage Council to step in urgently to stop the Opera House sales being used as a billboard to promote a horse race. A public petition protesting against the move has gathered more than 185,000 signatures in the past 24 hours.
If Alan Jones's plan was to promote a horse race, it worked.
And Prime Minister Morrison is with me. Good morning. Good morning, Al.
The two men are on the same page.
It's not like they're painting it on there. I mean, it's the lights flashing up there for a brief moment of time. So, look, I just don't understand why we tie ourselves up in knots about these things.
And there's no argument from the Premier.
The Opera House should also be used for promoting major events in New South Wales.
This is the image that will be splashed across the sails tomorrow night. As the draw is held, the barrier number will appear, so too will the jockey silks. The Premier insists it's a pared-back version, but the Conservation Management Plan says the Sydney Opera House exterior should not be regarded as a giant billboard or a commercial advertising opportunity.
The gambling lobby, particularly in New South Wales, is the equivalent of the National Rifle Association in America. It literally has politicians in the palm of their hand.
Bill Shorten appears to be having a bob each way. He supports horse racing, but questions the use of this Sydney landmark.
The Opera House is not a billboard. It's a thing of great beauty. It's part of our national treasure and deserves the respect that comes with it.
This extraordinarily damaging proposal is directly contrary to the cultural management plan adopted for the Opera House. That's why we've called upon the Heritage Council to issue an urgent stop work order.
The Opera House, under the requirements with the UNESCO and the World Heritage Listing, not only does it have to be physically protected, but it has to be presented properly.
And then there's the issue of public opinion. An online petition opposing the move has continued to gain pace with more than 185,000 names. There are real questions here whether the Premier, by approving the projection tomorrow night, has misread public sentiment. Today she doubled down, brushing aside growing opposition. The coalition government has made this mistake before. The difference now is it has very little political capital to spare. Ashley Raper, ABC News, Sydney.
Still to come this hour, fears for one of Australia's most popular tourist destinations.
It is meant to be a coastal oasis, but Cable Beach is crowded with cars and camels.
So the worst case scenario, of course, is that someone is seriously injured or, God forbid, killed on Cable Beach.
That's coming up.
More than 5,000 people are believed missing as the result of the earthquake and tsunami that obliterated neighbourhoods in Sulawesi 10 days ago. 1,900 bodies have been recovered so far, but there could be thousands more buried under the mud. Officials say the search for residents will continue until Thursday, when they'll be listed as missing and presumed dead. The government is considering turning the worst hit areas into mass graves and leaving them untouched. There are fears of the war on the border between Israel and Gaza as violence escalates. The Islamic militant group Hamas, which governs Gaza, has stepped up protests and attacks. Israel is sending in more troops and the death toll is once again rising. Middle East correspondent Eric Dworchak reports.
What began as weekly marches on the Gaza border are now almost daily games of cat and mouse between Israeli soldiers and people trying to breach the fence, with deadly consequences. The protesters are calling for an end to Israel's blockade of Gaza, where the economy has collapsed and living conditions are dire.
They see no future at the moment and they are no longer able to survive this deteriorating humanitarian situation in Gaza.
But among the civilians are militant units controlled by Hamas, whose aim is to breach the border and damage Israeli military installations. Israeli fire, tear gas and airstrikes have injured more than 20,000 people and killed around 200 since the end of March. In the last few weeks, the death rate has practically doubled and at least 12 people have died in the last 10 days. Both Hamas and Israel say they want to avoid another major conflict, but Hamas is increasing its attempts to breach the border and encouraging more people to protest, while Israel is upping troop numbers, armour and weaponry as conditions here get worse. Now, Israeli communities close to the border are feeling the effects too.
The smoke is very poison, and of course it's very hard to breathe it, and it's not good for the health. And they try to cover all the villages with smoke.
More reason for both sides to find a solution. Eric Twarchek, ABC News, Gaza.
Turkey is demanding answers from Saudi Arabia over allegations a journalist was killed in their Istanbul consulate. Jamal Khashoggi has written columns for newspapers including The Washington Post and is a high-profile critic of the kingdom's crown prince.
Jamal Khashoggi hasn't been seen since he entered Saudi Arabia's consulate in Istanbul on Tuesday. And as speculation about his whereabouts mounts, the Turkish president has taken an interest.
I am following it personally, and we will let all the world know the outcome of the investigation.
Khashoggi entered the consulate to get marriage papers, while his Turkish fiancée waited outside. She later raised the alarm when he never returned. His friends believe he was murdered inside the building.
What was explained to us is this: he was killed. Make your funeral preparations.
Khashoggi has been living in self-imposed exile in the US after criticising the Saudi government's reform program under Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. Also known as MBS, the prince has moved to modernise the economy, but has cracked down on internal dissent. Activists, writers and scholars have been arrested. Dozens of princes and senior officials were detained in Riyadh's Ritz-Carlton in November as part of a purge against graft and disloyalty. The Saudis say accusations of a hit squad are baseless, and to offer proof took journalists around the consulate, even opening cupboards to show Khashoggi was not hidden there.
We're working to search for him and we're worried about his case.
Security camera vision around the consulate and travel records have revealed few clues as to the mysterious disappearance, which has the potential to strain the already tense relationship between Turkey and the kingdom. Michael Troy, ABC News.
A stretch limousine transporting friends to a birthday party has crashed in New York State, killing 20 people. The limousine drove through a stop sign at the end of a highway and ploughed into a parked car, killing 2 pedestrians, the driver, and all 17 passengers died, including newlyweds and 4 sisters.
You can't wrap your head around such a tragedy where you have 4 of your daughters die.
Investigators say it's the deadliest transportation accident in the United States in almost a decade. Shares in ANZ Bank were slashed today, helping to drag down the whole market after it announced hundreds of millions of dollars in customer compensation payments following the Banking Royal Commission. Here's Alan Kohler.
ANZ revealed today that it expects to be paying $374 million in customer compensation. But there are a few things to note about this. First, only 57% of that money, or $214 million, actually gets to the customers. The rest of it is the cost of going through all the files to work out how much to pay. Second, all the lawyers needed to deal with the Royal Commission have cost $55 million, which means that the total cost of all this, at $215 million, exceeds the actual compensation. And finally, these are pre-tax amounts. They're tax deductible, of course, so your contribution to the cost of ANZ's Royal Commission blowout is $97 million. ANZ shares dropped 2.5% on the news, and other banks also fell in anticipation of something similar. But more importantly, the miners fell in line with global markets because US interest rate expectations are now being ratcheted up, and so is the trade war rhetoric with China. So the overall drop of 1.3% by the All Ordinaries was the biggest since March this year. Accounting software firm MYOB jumped nearly 20% following a $2.6 billion, $3.70 per share takeover approach from private equity Goliath KKR. Well, actually, it's one of those preliminary, non-binding indications of interest, so a maybe bid. The fall here today was part of a general sell-off around the world, starting in Europe and London on Friday and culminating in a 3% drop in Shanghai today. Likewise, commodities are all lower, apart from gold, and the Australian dollar is roughly steady tonight at 70.6 US cents. Now, as you can see, the currency has stayed in a tight, declining trading band for most of this year. If it keeps this pattern up, it'll be in the 60s around about later this week. And that's finance.
Australia has fought its way back into the first cricket test against Pakistan in Dubai. After the Pakistani opening batsman dominated most of day one, Australia's bowlers hit back with late wickets. At lunch on the second day's play, Pakistan was 4 for 329.
Keen to avoid another long day in the field, and with Pakistan resuming at 3 for 255, Australia had the old ball reversing early in their favour to start day two.
Straight away, finally for Australia. Now one shaping away from Pete Settle.
Scoring was proving difficult, with some tight bowling and an ageing ball helping to restrict the run rate. It took a rare moment of aggression to bring up the 300 for the home side.
And goes all the way.
The test didn't begin well for Australia, who were forced to bowl first on a flat and lifeless pitch.
Yeah, I think we would have had a bat first, but not to worry. We'll just have to start well with the ball and get a couple of early wickets.
But there were no early wickets, not even a chance.
He's freeing himself up now, and that's the first 6 of the morning.
The Pakistani openers, Imam Al-Haq and Mohammad Hafiz, posting a near-flawless 205-run stand.
He goes over the top, hitting with the spin and into the seats.
Before Nathan Lyon got the breakthrough in yesterday's final session.
The opening partnership has been broken.
Hafiz eventually falling for 126.
It's given. Second one down.
Pakistan losing 3 wickets for 56 in the third session.
Most test matches go for 5 days over here to get a result, so we're planning on going the full length, hopefully winning, late in day 5. That's the plan.
And a plan that most likely involves dealing with the intense Dubai heat. Sean Giles, ABC News.
It's a fundamental road safety message. Don't get behind the wheel of a car when you're exhausted. Yet in the Bathurst 1000 yesterday, champion driver David Reynolds was cleared to drive at speeds of up to 300 kilometres per hour on only 4 hours sleep. Reynolds was forced to quit the race when it became apparent he was dangerously tired. But the incident has raised concerns about the mixed messages given to young drivers.
While Craig Lowndes and his co-driver Stephen Richards celebrated their 12th combined win at Bathurst, the distressing images of a cramped and exhausted David Reynolds became a major talking point during the race.
As the main driver in the car, you don't want to be letting your team down, and maybe Dave felt a bit of that going on. But I guess it's up to the individual team to look after the best interests of their drivers.
The 2017 champion admitted even before the race that he wasn't in peak condition, operating on just 4 hours sleep.
You're not only putting the car at harm's way, you're putting yourself in harm's way. In a place like Bathurst, you can't afford to go a millimetre wrong. My pride is not that big to want to finish a race.
The Erebus team let Reynolds decide if he was well enough to continue hitting speeds of well over 300 kilometres an hour, but they ultimately took it out of his hands, acting once his cramping resulted in a pit lane penalty, replacing him with co-driver Luke Youlden on lap 146.
Probably first 15 laps, I wasn't mentally there. My body gave up after that.
The scene unfolded as New South Wales government-backed television ads broke up the telecast, urging drivers on the state's roads to not trust their tired self.
How tired are you?
Even at that lead end, that they can be impacted by fatigue, and they had to manage that during the race. And so we need to manage it ourselves on the road.
The Confederation of Australian Motorsport says an independent doctor who was on hand could lodge an incident report over the next few days, but it appears unlikely that Reynolds would be made to miss any racing.
He even said to me I should have just got Luke in when I started getting a spasm in my leg, and you know, Dave knows what happened, he knows what he did, and I doubt he'll do it again.
Reynolds now has just over a week to recover before the next round of the season on the Gold Coast. Glenn Lauder, ABC News.
To weather now, and with this glorious spring, the bees are out in force. Thanks to Maria for sharing this pic. There was a low of 9 last night, and after a little cloud this morning, a glorious sunny day and a top of 24. Around the region, warmer along the ranges today and a little cooler along the coast. Nationally, it was 21 in Sydney. Hobart saw 17. Melbourne had 28. A low pressure trough off the New South Wales coast is triggering isolated thunderstorms. A trough extending along northern parts of the coast to a low pressure circulating near central parts will continue to weaken this evening as it drifts away from the coast. Showers are forecast in Melbourne and Hobart. A cloudy day is expected in Sydney. A lot of cloud is forecast and showers across the region. Some similar temperatures tomorrow as to today. Here in Canberra, there's a high chance of rain tomorrow, and after a low of 5 tonight, a top of 23 is forecast tomorrow. The sun will rise at 25 past 6 and set again at 17 past 7. There's a medium chance of rain on Wednesday, cloudy on Thursday, and slight to medium chances of rain are forecast throughout the rest of the week and across the weekend. That's the latest from the Canberra newsroom. I'm Dan Bourchier. Great to have you along. Stay with us now for 7:30 with Laura Tingle.